When he walks, the earth trembles. When he swings his tail, he levels mountains. His very breath lights up the sky. Godzilla. Without a doubt, one of the most iconic fictional characters ever created. A Goliath who has stood the test of time and has existed for over 7 decades. He's been fighting monsters for longer than most of us have been alive. Across the years, the Big Chi has taken numerous forms, some being allegories for nuclear destruction, others being saviors of the planet, but throughout the years, one moniker of this beast has persisted: the King of Monsters. However, recently a new foe has emerged. A manga series where giant monsters and kaiju run wild on a daily basis, with some of these kaiju even claiming the title of Monster King for themselves. So what if we took the monsterverse Godzilla, specifically known for having a there can only be one mentality, and placed him into the world of One Punch Man? Obviously, the G-Man would not be pleased, so today we are discussing a scenario where Godzilla goes on a crusade against the toughest kaiju the series can offer and answering the question, would Godzilla prevail as the king of monsters in One Punch Man, or would he ultimately be dethroned and fall into irrelevancy? But I will admit I am not an expert on Godzilla scaling, which is why I brought over somebody who is to help me cover this topic. Say hello to Sage of the Cavs.
Yo, what's up, guys? Good to be on the channel. It's been a while since we've been doing a little collab together, so always glad to team up with my boy Satori here. Looking forward to preaching the Godzilla gospel, and you guys know how OP this guy is, and seeing how he fares against these ultra powerful characters from the One Punch Man verse.
Yep, happy to have you here. He has a lot of good content on his channel, including some Godzilla stuff, and I believe he's still waiting on a Godzilla video to reach a certain like goal to post another Godzilla video, so
yep.
If you guys like Godzilla content, go check him out after this video. And without any further ado, let's get straight into it. So the way this video will work is we will pick out all the largest and baddest monsters from One Punch Man who are large enough to be classified as kaiju, and we will have MonsterVerse Godzilla run a gauntlet of them. The G-Man will start out in his regular base form from Godzilla vs. Kong or Godzilla King of the Monsters, and if need be, he will evolve into his thermonuclear state as well. The G-Man will also get refreshed before each round, and without any further ado, let's get straight into it, starting with how strong base Godzilla is.
Yeah, so Godzilla is ultra impressive, but we're not going to touch the Evo Godzilla stuff for now. So just to go over sort of what he's capable of, a lot of people have scaled him super low and super high, so I think it's fair to establish a low end and a high end range for all of his stats. So in terms of his speed, the most consistent low-end interpretation is hypersonic, because even just casual whips of his tail, like as he turns around, have been described as from the director of Godzilla vs. Kong to be supersonic movements just from him turning around, because the size of his tail is so great. Even if he looks like he's turning slow, the amount of mass that is traveling in over that amount of space and that amount of time gets it to supersonic. So when he's actually moving at full speed and, you know, striking his opponents and such, he is getting to those hypersonic levels. But if you want to get him to a higher end interpretation, you could take one statement from one of the journal entries in the Godzilla verse, in the Monsterverse, that talks about his atomic breath being akin to Chekhov radiation. And if you ascribe to that, then basically you can get him to relativistic plus, probably multiple times faster than light, based on the fact that, you know, Kong is able to react to his atomic breath and he's able to react to Kong. So on a high end, you can get him with a generous interpretation to a few times FTL, and on a low end, you can get him to the low end of hypersonic. And in terms of his actual attack potency and defense, he's kind of a tank. You know, there are a lot of glass cannon characters throughout all of, you know, history in terms of fiction. He's not one of them. His atomic breath scales consistently to 5B or planetary due to the fact that his atomic breath is described as nucleosynthesis, which is subatomization. So that alone gets it all the way up to 2.56 to the 33rd joules, or planetary. And this is actually backed up by the fact that after he goes thermonuclear and discharges that blast that disintegrates Ghidorah and disperses the 20-kilometer minimum wide cloud that Ghidorah was producing, his atomic breath is still considered to be his strongest weapon, and that is important because the amount of force that would be necessary to not only disintegrate Ghidorah there, but also disperse that storm cloud, gets all the way up to high or multi-continental or even planetary. So saying that his atomic breath is above that is super consistent. So I think that that alone gets him to planetary with the atomic breath, and then he scales to that atomic breath in terms of his durability, because whenever he's fighting Kong, he fires one of those blasts at him. Kong absorbs the blast into his axe and then hits him with it. So he should be scaling to that level of attack potency as well. And if you want to say maybe slightly below because the energy is discharged in all directions, that's fine, but the fact still stands, he has to scale somewhere close to that. So basically we have a character who on the low end is hypersonic, on a high end is FTL, and on a low end is planetary in terms of his attack potency and durability, and we can talk about his high ends later whenever they become more important, but there are higher end interpretations of those, specifically with some really interesting statements that we get. But this is where we're going to start him off at, because it's not necessary for him to be higher yet in this with these earlier matchups.
Yep, so with the scaling for Godzilla established, we can get into the Monster Association and just in general Monster Kaiju Gauntlet. So, first of all, honorable mentions to Goketsu and Rover, who were too small to make it here. Like, they're pretty big, but they're just too small. They're like 10 times the size of a normal person, so not quite kaiju material. So as much as I would have loved to discuss those guys, they just don't make it. So the first kaiju on the list is actually 100 Eyes Octopus, who most people probably won't even remember, because all he did was wreck up some buildings and then died to Tatsumaki. And I'm actually going to give size references for every monster because it's a giant monster video, of course I want to do size references. And Sage actually hasn't seen these, so we'll get his honest reactions to the size references as well.
I'm excited.
Yeah. So this is 100 Eyes Octopus in size, I'm gonna put it on screen as well. And it's pretty decently big.
Oh my god.
Yeah, this is like, at first he starts out really small, he's like encompassing one single building, but then he eats a bunch of concrete and just buffs up to like a town level in terms of just size alone.
No, that's insane.
Yeah, so he can wreck up buildings and he can just sponge bullets and sponge a lot of slashes from a guy who has very high AP, like very high attack potency in terms of flashy flash. So like, he's able to just cut him up, but he's not able to really kill him because the wounds are too shallow. But like in terms of AP and durability, obviously 100 Eyes Octopus doesn't actually scale to Flashy Flash because Flashy just doesn't have the required like length of his sword, I guess, to just chop him in half or something like that. But yeah, this guy gets damaged by regular bullets and yeah, kind of just... He would crawl onto Godzilla and probably try to bite his head off with that mouth, and then Godzilla would fire an atomic breath into his head from the mouth and then just blow him up from the inside.
Yeah.
He wouldn't even need atomic breath, but that's just a cool way to kill him, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, somebody who's being damaged by bullets is... I mean, dude, even just Godzilla's, like, strikes should do massive damage to somebody who has, like, bullet-level durability. So yeah, you know, as cool as he is, he's getting boxed up pretty quick.
Yeah. So moving on, next up we have the Ancient King, which is actually the first time we hear the moniker of King being used, so Godzilla's gonna be extra pissed at this one. And this is how big he is. He's anime only, and he's pretty tall, over 80 meters actually, and basically the best scaling he has is he is stated relative to Deep Sea King, who should be about city level and massively hypersonic based off scaling to Genos, who can blow off a part of a mountain, which has been calced to town to city level. And then he could possibly be sub-relativistic via scaling to Genos again, who in a later form was later dodging lasers. So you could argue that he might be like some percentage of the speed of light, but it would be a really low percentage because the Genos speed of dodging lasers is only calculated about 0.3 times the speed of light, and this Genos was already a blitz level above the Genos who fought Deep Sea King. So it's like, the Ancient King, for one, he's a very big target. I don't think he's dodging an atomic breath if it moves at light speed.
Yeah.
But even if he doesn't, like, his stats, he's a mini Godzilla. Like, in every sense of the word. He is a mini version. He is weaker, he is smaller, he is less durable, arguably slower. So, yeah, it would be kind of cool to see these guys fight, but I don't think he's really doing that much. He does have a, like, blast attack, which we never even see because he dies before he gets to use it, but, you know, could be,
Couldn't be Godzilla, bro. Couldn't be Godzilla.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so I think you phrased it perfectly. He's just a mini Godzilla. Like and here's the thing too. So if you want to take the Chekhov radiation statement, basically this comes from one of the journal entries from one of the scientists in the Monsterverse. They essentially liken Godzilla's atomic breath to Chekhov radiation because of how it looks. But then we find out later on that his atomic breath is a byproduct of nucleosynthesis that happens in these glands in his throat. For somebody who like might scale to some tiny percentage of light speed, even a lower end interpretation or a moderate interpretation of the atomic breath should just get that way above anything that this guy can do. So he's probably getting blasted. Pause. And no, he's probably getting taken out pretty easily.
Yeah.
I just don't see a way that he could damage Godzilla or anything here.
Yeah, like, he would try to blast him, it wouldn't work. Godzilla would just no-sell it like Broly with that Kamehameha. And then it would show him what a real atomic breath is supposed to look like, or what a real blast is supposed to look like. So,
yeah.
I think we can move on now to Beefcake. And, this is how big he is.
Oh my god. Okay. So, that's a big guy. Okay, what is this guy capable of?
I can't with the size.
Good
Just
God.
looks so hilarious.
You know what's hilarious too? Just based on the scaling that you went over earlier, this is like one of the funniest battles of all time because Godzilla unironically just cuts his legs off. And just like cuts him down like a tree, bro. Oh my god.
Just
I'll let
chops
you go
him
for
down
what
and
he's capable
chops
of.
him into pieces.
Oh no.
Okay, I will be
Oh,
honest,
no.
this is anime Beefcake going off one inconsistent footprint scene. This is actually what he is, what his size is like.
Godly, bro. Okay, so it's even worse.
Okay, now I'm gonna actually be honest. Those are both outliers. This is his more so real
Okay,
size. But
Okay. Well, so then he just instead of getting cut down at the kneecaps, he's just gonna get bisected. Okay, cool.
okay, I just realized Godzilla is at the perfect size to bite at his unmentionable.
Oh no. Oh no.
Okay, anyway, basic scaling, he is city level based off of producing shockwaves that can wipe out like town level areas, and also he just throws a barrage of punches that's calced to city level. And via just being this big, he should be hypersonic or supersonic. But the thing is, he doesn't have any other feats aside from just getting punched by Saitama, so yeah, kinda not doing much. Now, his size is really inconsistent, because, like, again, some scenes he's, like, 2,000 meters tall, some even, like, 8,000 almost. And then, more consistently, he's in that 270 meter range. Like, his official height is that. And compared to all the buildings around him, he's bigger than that, but still, like, not that big. So next over, we move to Pluton. Now, Pluton, a lot of you guys might not remember this guy either. What he is the king of the underworld, which firstly, Godzilla's gonna be pissed, but secondly, that title belongs to Hades. Thank you very much. This fraud does not deserve that title, only my king Hades deserves it. The character I glaze most in this world. But anyway, this is how big he is.
Jesus. Okay.
These guys are
quite a large being. Dude, that sword alone is like 10 times the size of Godzilla.
And you know what's funny? It's gonna be the same way Jigen did the perfect Susanoo in Naruto.
Yeah, just kick right through him. Oh yeah. No, here's the thing. Just based on what I know about this guy, pretty strong, but like again, there's so I don't want to get into this statement quite yet, but there's a statement that can possibly get Godzilla's atomic breath to like star level plus, potentially even like galaxy level, depending on how you interpret the statement itself. But even just planetary should be enough to just cut this guy in half. So
yeah, basically his greatest feat is like destroying a city, which has been calced to island level, maybe even higher if you go by like vaporization and whatnot. Maybe you could get it to country level, but this guy is gonna swing his sword down on Godzilla and it's gonna break, and then Godzilla is just gonna topple him over and just blast him, or even just rip him apart.
Yeah, it's Mighty Mouse versus, you know, this giant pig.
No, it can't be.
How long has it been? 2 years? If he appears again...
The entire city will be leveled. The city's close by. If it makes it over there, it will be a massacre.
It's like a force of nature.
He's a living catastrophe, destroying all in his path. I admire such indiscriminate destruction.
So moving on, next up is Elder Centipede. Now this is where things potentially could get a little bit interesting. So this is how big he would be compared to Godzilla. And
Okay.
this guy's scaling is he's over 3 kilometers long, or almost 2 miles, and he is bare minimum, like the lowest of low balls, mountain to island level. But for this video, we'll be going with a higher interpretation to make this more interesting.
Yeah.
So he can be argued to be continental or multi-continental, because later on we'll get to Fraud Centipede, or Joke Centipede, or however you want to call him. I'm not calling him by his real name, because he doesn't deserve to be called that. But, you don't know, I've dropped an entire diss track on that guy. But anyway, we get Fraud Centipede, who is small planet level, maybe continental if you're really lowball, but more consistently small planetary. And then we have Platinum S, who is a one-shot level below him, but not more than that, not any more than that, because he can take 2 punches from Garo, and then Garo goes on to damage Sage immediately afterwards. And Platinum is a higher form of Golden S, and Golden S shouldn't be, like, infinitely weaker than Platinum. He is definitely weaker, but he's not, like, exponentially weaker or anything. They should still be in that same ballpark. And Golden S hears that King destroyed Elder Centipede, and he's like, oh damn, like, we gotta watch out for this one. So Elder Centipede, just via that, would already be there, but more than that, he can fight Bang and Bomb, who I believe both to be stronger than Golden S via various methods that I went over in my Golden S versus Bang video, if you want to check that out. So we have multiple ways to get Elder Centipede to this continental or even multi-continental level range. And what he also has is crazy regeneration, because you legit need to destroy his entire body. Like, he got his brain fried, disintegrated, splattered, and he still regenerated from it. So he is a very tough customer here, but multi-continental compared to planetary is still not that big.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is the biggest challenge that Godzilla's going to face here, is just eliminating enough of him to where it actually puts him down. Like, dude, he's a centipede, but really he's a cockroach. Like, really hard to put this thing down. So, and also based on the size comparison, I mean, so Godzilla's atomic breath in terms of, I guess, cylindrical circumference is not all that wide. Like, even his biggest blasts are, like, you know, not even as thick as he is in terms of his, like, torso thickness, I guess. And so blasting, you know, these atomic breath blasts through the centipede is, I mean, it's gonna do, like, it's gonna just go right through it. Like, there's not gonna be any problem in terms of, like, actually damaging or, like, you know, cutting off pieces. But it's like, okay, so then what happens when he regenerates? Again, and again, and again, and again, you know? So I personally do think, like, this could be a really big issue for Godzilla, because I'm not sure he has the actual destructive capacity to take this thing down. Now, if you say that Centipede somehow gets in a straight line or something, then maybe you could argue that Godzilla could just like blast a hole straight through the entire body and win that way, because he does blast a hole from, the several kilometers into the ground in Godzilla vs. Kong in order to get to the inner Earth. So he is capable of firing an atomic breath blast that spans several kilometers. That's not an issue for him. The issue is, that's probably not gonna be... It's like, there's a very... I don't even know what the percentage is. It's got to be like 0.0001% that Centipede actually gets in a position where he's like lined up straight head to tail to where he could like have a hole blasted through him the whole way. So, I mean, best case scenario for Godzilla, he just fires this like blast in all, turning his head, wiping out everything that he sees, and cuts him up into enough pieces to where he can't fully regenerate. But I don't really know if that would work either, and I think, honestly, even though Godzilla massively outscales here, he's probably going to lose just because we know that he does fatigue, and if he is just, like, having to fire these atomic breath blasts at Centipede over and over again just to have him regenerate over and over again...
I would say... we also forgot to get into the speed scaling, or I forgot. So basically, Elder Centipede does outspeed a laser beam from Geno, so if you think that's light speed, that would be him light speed as well.
Yeah.
But if you don't think that's the case, then he is still just marginally slower than that version of Genos, who I scaled to around 0.7 times FTL based off of the earlier feat of him dodging lasers and then the amount of upgrades he gets from it. So... it should be somewhere near that lightspeed mark, so Elder Centipede maybe could try to dodge an atomic breath, but like, I feel like it's not in character for him to do, because he always just takes attacks. He's a tank, he's a damage sponge. So I think the biggest thing is like, if he charges at Godzilla head on, and a decent portion of his body is lined up, I think that like, if from his head the next like a kilometer just gets destroyed, maybe that could still put him down, because like the most we've seen is his insides getting blown open, like getting disintegrated, including his brain. But like, if there's no shell at all for like a third of his body, like there's nothing at all for like a third of his body, I'm not sure if he could regenerate from that. I maybe don't think so. So,
yeah,
worst case scenario, I think Godzilla could just grab him up, open his mouth, and then just fire an atomic breath into him. And if we say that his shell is at least like tough enough to momentarily contain the beam and not just have it come out the other side, then it could make its way throughout the entire body. If it doesn't just pierce the shell immediately and just go out of his body, but if it contains it at all for like even a second or two, I think the beam can just travel through his whole body and just incinerate him enough.
Yeah.
So personally, I'd give the win to Godzilla, because like, it seems kind of disingenuous to say that he just outlasts, even though the scaling is that much in Godzilla's favor.
Yeah, that's the issue, is like, because like to me, I think this is also where like start distance would matter, because if they start like a kilometer apart, right, and then like, Elder Centipede typically is going to, like you said, like charge at him, and in that scenario, at least like a kilometer of his body is going to be lined up in a straight line, and in character, Godzilla's gonna like fire that blast right at him. And in that scenario, like, yeah, he's cooked, but in a scenario where they start, I don't know, like 500 yards from each other, okay, so there's not gonna be enough time for him to fire a blast and cover enough of his body for him to put him down. I do think that's an interesting point, though. Like, if you think the outer shell of him can contain that blast for even a second, like any amount of time, really, then he should be able to, like, line him up in a way that would allow for him to disintegrate a good portion of him. So, I think if you think that he ends up being straightened out for any amount of time that would be significant enough for the beam to like take out a good portion of his body, then he loses. If you think that his outer shell can contain the blast to any degree, he loses. But if you think that he's just going to be coiled, like he is in the photo that Satori put up for the scaling, for the size scale, then it's going to be really hard for Godzilla to actually get him. I will say, if we do... Oh, go ahead.
Hold on. I actually thought of something. If Godzilla destroys his head, then his body just kind of goes limp, though. Like, until he regenerates. Like, he couldn't move.
Ooh, that's a good point.
So, like, yeah, I think Godzilla just destroys his head and then just swirls the blast around until it destroys its whole body.
Yep, that's a great point. Because, like, even if he regenerates his head one time, Godzilla's gonna then know, like, okay, I gotta take out this thing's entire body.
Yeah.
And he 100% would be able to react and, like, catch Elder Centipede's mouth and blast a hole through his brain. So, yeah, no, I think that's an excellent point.
Yeah, because, like, he's just gonna go limp for as long as it takes to regenerate, which it won't take long, but Godzilla's gonna notice and he's gonna be like, okay, let me just finish this then.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, Godzilla definitely does take this, but it would be kind of interesting to see, like, Elder Centipede trying to wrap around him, deal damage with his mandibles and whatnot until Godzilla finishes it.
Yeah, well, and with the attack potency scaling that Elder Centipede has, I'm not sure if he would even be able to damage Godzilla. So he would have to win a war of attrition, you know?
Yeah. I also don't think, like, Godzilla's probably not gonna be dumb enough to just use up everything, even if Elder just keeps regenerating. So, like, it's probably just a stalemate in the end, even if Elder Centipede can just keep regenerating infinitely.
Yeah.
Because Godzilla's not gonna waste everything. He's gonna be like, okay, this is a waste of time, I'm going home.
Yeah. Well, and if you
pose no threat to me.
If you are of the opinion that thermonuclear is required here, I mean, that discharge that he has, like the like EMP blast, it would just like disintegrate all of Elder Centipede. I mean, it dissipated a 20 kilometer storm cloud. So, yeah.
Yep. So next up we have Clown Centipede. And this guy is this big. I don't think there's any need to put Godzilla in the panel.
Yeah. Okay. That is enormous.
Yeah, so his size varies greatly because in some panels he's like this, and then in others you can just see Garo, a regular human in terms of size, just being like the size of one of his eyes, almost. Like one of the small eyes, not like the big ones, but the small eyes. So the size is very inconsistent because in some shots his mandibles are like hundreds of meters long compared to the surrounding buildings and whatnot, and then in others they're like barely 10 times longer than a normal human being's height, which one of the reasons that I hate Fraud Centipede, one of the many reasons, one of the reasons why I dropped the diss track. But anyway, in terms of his head alone, there are like the main two ways to scale the scale is like one where it's about 50 meters, and then Godzilla is quite a bit bigger than Sage's head. Not in terms of like length or anything, obviously Sage is way longer, but the head is still large, like small enough for Godzilla to reasonably grab and whatnot. But if you go with the higher end interpretations, then it's he could swallow Godzilla whole.
Yeah, well, and I would say that would be bad for Centipede.
It really would.
If he swallows Godzilla, he's cooked, bro. Like he's getting burned alive from the inside.
Yeah, let's go into it. Let's go into the scaling. So Fraud Centipede, bare minimum continental, just based off the size alone, but he has consistently been calced to small planetary. And his speed, okay, there's two ways to go about this. There's the right way and the highway. So the highway is saying that he can potentially be 12 times FTL via being a blitz tier below Garo, but still being able to somewhat fight with him. Or, if you say he gets time to accelerate, he could possibly be as fast as Garo, so that would get him pretty high. But the more consistent scaling is he's constantly getting outsped by bullets. 13 shots all reached him before his mandibles could complete one single swing, and that was over a big distance. And then, what he also does is he cannot catch a helicopter. Like, a helicopter needs to have his engine ruined for Centipede to catch it. Like, the helicopter would have escaped. So, Fraud, Joke, Clown Centipede. Yeah, he is subsonic speed. So, and the best part about this Fraud is that unlike Elder Centipede, he actually has a regeneration core, which if you destroy it, he can no longer regenerate. So if he swallows Godzilla, which might happen, Godzilla is just gonna fire an atomic breath inside of him, destroy the core, and kill him. That's my take on how this battle goes.
Yeah,
personally.
I think.
What do you think?
I think that's correct. Like, I mean, even the low end scaling for Godzilla gets him to hypersonic, and so it's like there's just nothing that Centipede is going to be able to do without Godzilla letting him do it. So it's like if he ends up in Centipede's mouth, right? If we use like the big size scaling, then what's going to happen is, like, Godzilla is going to only end up there because he wants to, and at that point, he's just going to fry him from the inside. I do think, even with, low planetary scaling, he's probably still getting cut in half. If he gets his brain fried, obviously, again, he's kind of screwed, because then the rest of his body gets, bisected by the atomic breath. Because, like, even though the atomic breath is going to be teeny tiny compared to something the size of Centipede, like, it's not really gonna matter, because it'll still cut him in half, so yep. Like cutting his entire body in half is really like an actual possibility. And then again, if you assume a low end scaling for Godzilla's atomic breath and say it's low planetary, I mean, I imagine the durability for Centipede comes from his outer shell. So then you could just say the outer shell does contain the blast, and then that just means that, like, this atomic breath blast does go from head to tail and just absolutely disintegrate everything on the inside. So, yeah, I think this is much, much worse for him.
Yeah, Fraud Centipede is gonna end up just like he did in the original.
Yeah.
Which, is this.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate.
Yep, so next up we have Evil Ocean Water. Now, Sage had a very good time with him in the Gojo video, if you remember.
Oh, man.
We had a blast with that one. But, he is calculated to be around 200 kilometers tall.
Yeah. Yes.
Now, there are some shots where he's smaller, but consistently there's curvature of the Earth showing in his panels.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also have, like, bare minimum, one of his eyeballs is larger than an aircraft carrier, or like a similar size. And aircraft carriers can, like, carry Godzilla on them. So it's still pretty big. Yeah.
So this is one of those examples where it's like, okay, the scaling doesn't matter. Because there's, in my opinion, without Godzilla going thermonuclear, and even then it's kind of a question, just the sheer mass of ocean water, which is like ocean water's advantage in basically every scenario, is going to be a massive problem. Because Godzilla for the MonsterVerse has solid AoE, but for the One Punch verse, he doesn't have solid AoE. Like, the actual range on his attacks, in terms of, like, distance, is pretty solid, like several kilometers. But in terms of the actual, area of effect that he can have, his atomic breath blast is hyper focused. So there's not really gonna be a way for him to destroy enough of ocean water with just his atomic breath to cause much of an issue. Like, he's eventually just gonna fatigue. Like, there's just no way for him to destroy enough of ocean water for it to be an actual issue. Now, if you go with, like, some of the smaller variants, then,
obviously, it just steps on him.
Exactly, but, like, at his full power, ocean water literally has, like, the volume of an ocean. And Godzilla has never shown...
Literally calculated to multi-continental just via holding that much water together.
Yeah. And while Godzilla does have the attack potency that goes far beyond multi-continental, he doesn't have the actual destructive capacity for it. And that's where he's going to run into some serious issues here.
Yeah. And ocean water as well. His ocean cannons can damage Goro, who could damage Joke Centipede, sorry. who could damage that guy. And that guy is calc to small planetary, so these beams can also be small planetary. They're also really fast because ocean water, in a weaker form, in a much, much smaller state, could react to Garo, who at that point was like 20 times FTL. So maybe even 40 times, like depending on how you calc it. And Godzilla, yeah, he is tough enough to take it, but he's gonna be getting tossed around and like drowned out. Like, can he deal with the drowning? Like,
yeah, he can
like
breathe
obviously. Obviously he's amphibious, but like, can he breathe indefinitely?
Yeah, no, he's got gills.
Okay. Oh, wait, I am stupid. I am stupid. I don't know biology. Dude, I literally imagined his gills as I was saying that, and I didn't think about it. So, but anyway, like, Godzilla, in terms of sheer scale, is just not somebody like the One Punch Man characters that can just slice continents off the face of the planet, which is what would need to be done against evil ocean water. So
yeah,
I think that thermonuclear does have to come out. Now, what do you think thermonuclear, does it have enough scale to destroy evil ocean water?
The answer is maybe, right? Because so we know that Godzilla doesn't really care about humanity, but he kind of does. So like he definitely sees it, it's like you know how there's that thing about like how elephants see us the way that we see puppies. It's kind of the same way for Godzilla, like, except it's closer to like ants that he has a certain level of fondness for. So Godzilla tries not to kill people as much as possible, but like his primary objective is always to like take down the monsters that he's fighting. So if you look at how he sort of focused that sort of omnidirectional blast against Ghidorah, he does disperse the 20-kilometer cloud, and he does disintegrate Ghidorah, but you could make an argument that he kind of contained it to a certain degree, and there's a little bit of evidence to back that up in the novelizations, but nothing too crazy. But if you want to take him at his absolute peak form, like, just his passive discharge of the EMP was able to, like, severely damage, like, rip the skin off of Ghidorah. Ghidorah being easily multi-continental, potentially high planetary. So, like, it's a real issue. And then whenever you take into consideration the low-end scaling of the final blast being, you know, high planetary, and then the high-end scaling of it being up there in the star level of attack potency, because... So this is where it comes from, right? So the main cloud is 20 kilometers. He discharges the main cloud, right? And like that gets it to about planetary. But he also, by doing that, discharged all of the storms around the entire planet, including one that covered the entirety of Brazil. So if you take a higher end calc, you can get that blast to star level, which this is where I want to bring up the statement that we talked about before, which is his atomic breath is described as the most devastating weapon in the universe, or in nature. So that would include, on a high end, things like quasars, which are like galaxy busters. So you can legitimately get his attack potency on here with his atomic breath to that level. So it is consistent for that to still be his strongest. Yeah, it's insane. But it is consistent for that to still be his strongest attack and be able to output star levels of attack potency with this blast. So if you take a high-end interpretation, the range on it is actually planetary, but the thing is we don't actually see like destruction on that level. So you would have to make a really like mental gymnastics based argument to say that he would be able to wipe out all of ocean water. But if you want to say that like he wipes out 20 kilometers worth of ocean water, 10% of them, and then can do it again, then I would say like that's a fair assertion. And if he's not concerned about not killing all of the humans that are around, then maybe you could say that he expands the range of it to a point where he can destroy a large part of ocean water that then, you know, causes him to, I guess, be depowered significantly. But then there's also the question of, like, Godzilla lives in the water. So does he really want to vaporize half of the water on the planet, you know? So it's like, This is probably the worst matchup for Godzilla because not only is it really difficult to argue that he has the AoE to actually take down ocean water, it's also like if he does, is it in his best interest to do so? So I think this is one where Godzilla probably loses, even though he massively should outscale. It's just like there's not anything he can do without ultimately harming himself here.
Yeah, like, in the long run, even if he kills ocean water, he loses because now he has way less environment to protect because he just destroyed a large part of it.
Yeah.
And he has a lot less water to live in as well, so...
Yeah.
Like, it's a mental loss, at the very least.
Yeah.
But, yeah, this is a pretty insane situation where Godzilla literally can outscale him billions, trillions of times. But that scale that ocean water has is just ridiculous. So, like, it depends. It's up to you guys. Like, how does this go?
Yeah, because, I mean, so if you want to take a hyper-literal interpretation of some of the things that happen in the comics, he does either get hit by a fragment of a meteor that wiped out, you know, a good portion of the life on the planet, or he gets hit by the meteor itself and survives. And so, if that's... It's like, it's not the Permian extinction event, but it's the one that came after that. So he does survive an extinction event. So you could say, like, even if he does, you know, expand the range and wipe out ocean water entirely, that there's still going to be more water on the planet, and he could just go into the inner Earth, into the inner Earth and survive. But it's like, is that going to be an ideal circumstance for him? Probably not. And do you have to make some really crazy leaps to get his range to planetary like that? Yeah. So it's really hard to see a case for Godzilla here. I will say, I'm not sure if ocean water has any win cons over him either. Like,
yeah, it's kind of a stalemate.
Yeah, so I think they would
like,
eventually...
at best, he can just toss him around.
Exactly.
With the water cannons and whatnot. But, like, he can't actually kill him, probably.
Yeah, totally agree. Because, I mean, and then he could literally just go into the inner Earth. Like, there's nothing that ocean water can do there. So, it's like, okay, like, then it's just over.
Unless, like, could he, like, fire an ocean cannon directly into Godzilla's gills? Like, are the gills any weaker, like the inside of Godzilla?
Yeah, actually, the gills do, like, the gills take, they get hit by these rockets. Now, he's in a weaker state, but they get hit by missiles, and he actually, like, winces in pain. So that is kind of shown to be a weak point for him. But then later on, as he gets stronger, he absorbs more energy and stuff, and then gets to the point where we see him in King of Monsters. It's not as much of an issue for him. It's really just in, like, that first Godzilla movie from 2014 that we actually see that.
Yeah, so this one's kind of up to you. Do you think Godzilla has the scale, or is it just a stalemate and they just go their separate ways after devastating the planet?
Yeah.
So moving on, next up is the Monster King of One Punch Man. So this is like the big dog now. It is Orochi, who in terms of size does come up a little short, I'm not gonna lie. This is how big he is, around 50 meters. So not the biggest monster, but he does have decent scaling for this, because just his sucking force, just the vacuuming force of his tail alone has been calculated from moon to small planetary. And he can contain that force with just his tail, and then he can take in all the energy that he sucked up from the planet and convert it into a massive energy blast called the Gaia Cannon, which, by the way, I've seen people use this to lowball, like, oh, he's using a tiny fraction of the planet's power to fuel his attack, that means he's not planetary. But you can just argue the conversion is just much large, like the output is much larger than the input. Sort of like Godzilla, like how he consumes the planet's radiation to grow stronger, but he can output these massively higher AP blasts. Same with Orochi, he can just consume like a part of the Earth and convert it into something much stronger. So with the Gaia Cannon, it doesn't really have that concrete of a scale because he just kind of gets bodied by Saitama. Like, it's kind of unfortunate, but it should at least be massively above the sucking force, again. And then, in terms of speed, Orochi actually should significantly outspeed Godzilla, because in a weaker, suppressed state, with his mask on, which he is stronger when he is unmasked, but in his masked form, and specifically suppressed to not kill Garo, in their battle, he is able to keep up with him pretty well, and Garo at that point is over 6 times faster than Light. And if you're wondering where I'm getting all these numbers from, you can watch my Poseidon versus Flashy Flash video. That's where I did the speed scale for One Punch Man. So that is like the minimum, because that's suppressed Orochi in a weaker form. So this unmasked one, he's just gonna be slippery. He's gonna be crawling all over the place, shooting fire and energy blasts and whatnot. And his arsenal is actually pretty insane, because for one, he has very high level body morphing. He can conjure up all sorts of dragons that can all act independently, fire beams. He can probably detach parts of himself, because we see this against Tatsumaki later on when he's turned to mush. He can just detach parts of himself that can act independently as like one like big colony of mush and whatnot. It's pretty insane. And then the biggest things are high combat IQ. Like, he is very skilled and very intelligent. Adaptability, he can literally master a high-level martial art just by seeing it once. And speaking of which, we know this because he mastered the Water Stream Fist from Garo. Now, the Water Stream actually allows users to redirect attacks and throw them back at people at twice the force. So if the attack isn't a complete one-shot level above Orochi, he should just be able to redirect it. And we see this works on energy blasts as well, because we see that Bang deflects blast from Rover. So yeah, like this actually might be interesting. What do you think about this one?
Yeah, so Orochi has a lot in his bag that can actually cause some serious issues for Godzilla. Not only the speed, but also the attack potency, also the versatility, the adaptability, all of it. So this is where we have to take a higher end interpretation of Godzilla in order to actually make him compete. So you would have to say, you know, that the atomic breath scales at least to relativistic, and then you can get him to a couple times FTL based on the fact that Kong is able to intercept the blast and then, you know, redirect it at him with the axe. And, you know, obviously Godzilla's able to react to his attacks and his physical movement. So you can get him to a few times FTL, but he's still significantly below where Orochi scales speed-wise. So then what about attack potency and durability? Well, if you want to take the highest end interpretation, like I said, we can get it all the way up to galaxy level for the atomic breath, but you can actually get it crazier than that. So
hold off on that. Okay. We'll get to something else later, but for now, let's just go with the planet meta for now, and then if we need to, we can go with those star level metas and whatnot.
Okay, do you wanna cut that out then? Do you want me to just go back to
no, it's fine. It's a good tease.
Okay. Okay, so you can consistently get him, like I said, to like that high planetary to even star level, but the problem with that is, like, again, Orochi, while he does have like a particular place where, like, if you hit him, he's done. He's so much faster than Godzilla that I think he'd do a really good job of avoiding the blast. So it then just like comes down to, like, can Godzilla get a hold of him, hold him in place, and hit him with the blast? And I personally don't think so. I do think if the atomic breath hits Orochi, that it's probably a really big issue. But Orochi is really intelligent and, you know, hyper adaptable and all of these things. So I don't know, man. I don't really see, for standard form Godzilla here, I don't really see a method for him to actually win.
Yeah, the thing is, like, this is pretty much a Fly versus T-Rex scenario, but the Fly can actually do something to the T-Rex, because Orochi is already pretty high into small planetary. Like, just one more increase and he'd be planetary, so the Gaia Cannon might be very low planet level. But if he does take the time to charge it, I think it's gonna take longer than the Atomic Breath, in which case it might be able to match the Atomic Breath briefly, but it should still get overpowered. And Orochi might not even be able to charge it up before Godzilla can fire the Atomic Breath, so I think that's a bad idea. But canonically, Orochi only starts with the Gaia Cannon if he feels his opponent is, like, just super strong, like actually an anomaly, which he might feel that way about Godzilla, but I feel like if he knows he has a severe speed advantage and whatnot, he would try other things first. Especially if Godzilla ever shoots an atomic breath, he's gonna be like, okay, let me not use the Gaia cannon, because that would be a bad idea getting hit by this. So,
Yeah.
he would just be running around, peppering Godzilla with blasts and whatnot. And with Orochi, we actually just see him spamming the blast. Like, I don't think it's fair to say he has an infinite amount of energy, because we never get any confirmation of that, but he definitely has enough to just keep spamming and spamming, like, over and over again, from all sides, because again, he can detach parts of himself, and that form into dragons that just, like, he could literally make turrets. He could literally just place turrets on the battlefield, while he also just deflects any swings Godzilla takes at him or just dodges. So, like, this is a very fun matchup to discuss, for me personally. Like, I would love to see this animated.
Yeah.
Or just, like, a manga version of this one. But, if we do take higher versions of Godzilla scaling, then Orochi just cannot damage him, like, at all. And eventually, he's gonna get caught, or it's just gonna be a stalemate and they're both gonna go home. So...
Yeah, well, because there's... I don't want to get into the super high scaling stuff yet until we get to that time. But even just like a pretty moderate high end gets Godzilla to like that high planetary to even low star level, and that's without considering a lot of the craziest stuff. And so if you have his durability at that place, and like Orochi from his most like generous scaling, it's even difficult to get him to that star level. I would say, you know, it would be one of those things where it's kind of an annoyance, but it's not something where he can necessarily like put him down very easily. But with the massive speed advantage, it's like Godzilla also doesn't have many win conditions over him either. It's like, can he hit him with the atomic breath? Maybe, but the atomic breath scales to at the high end light speed and really no higher than that. And so it's like, Orochi being able to dodge light speed attacks is not really a question. So
yeah, because again, like suppressed, he's 6 times faster than light.
Yeah, so it's
and
like...
he just casually, like, while suppressed, also blitzed a guy who claims to be able to dodge light speed attacks with precog.
Yeah.
And he just casually blitzes that guy, so it's just like...
Yeah, so it's like Mike Tyson versus Floyd Mayweather. Like, Floyd's never going to get hit by Mike Tyson's punches, but, like, if Mike Tyson connects, it's just a one-shot KO. And so that's kind of how I see this going, is, like, Orochi could be a really big annoyance to Godzilla, and eventually I'd probably see it going in a stalemate, because I don't see a way... It's either a stalemate or somehow Orochi gets tired and gets hit, or, like, gets caught off guard. Because, like, Godzilla does have some pretty good intellect feats as well. Like, he is actually smart. So not as smart as Orochi, but like, so he might be able to come up with a strategy to kind of take Orochi by surprise. Or if he is able to get a hold of Orochi, then it's probably over. Because like, I don't think Orochi has the physical capability of like breaking Godzilla's grip. So if he is able to like, you know, catch him slipping, tag him with his tail, grab a hold of him or something with his hands and like dig the claws in, he might be able to just like fry him. So I say it's either a stalemate or Godzilla wins that way, but I think it's more likely that they just can't really do anything significant to each other.
Even then, like, if Godzilla grabs Orochi, we literally see Orochi being able to just disperse himself into dragons. Like, he disperses his arm into, like, dragon tendrils. So, and he can just bring it back, like, those dragon tendrils just morph back into the arm later. So it's just like, even if Godzilla grabs him by the shoulders, he can just probably slip out anyway. Like, he's just that slippery. Like, he's the cockroach here, for sure.
Yeah.
Like, he even looks like the cockroach, but anyway. So yeah, this is either a stalemate or a win in Godzilla's favor, especially if you take the higher feats. Thermonuclear is also a problem, because then he actually has massive AoE, which Orochi... Like, the only way he's getting out of it is if he just outruns the EOE. Like, if he just runs away from the pulse. I don't know, like, how does that go?
Well, so the pulse itself has actually been calced to like 30 times FTL. Okay. Yeah, just based on how much area it covers and the amount of time that it does. If you guys want to lowball it, you could say because it functions like an EMP, it's electromagnetic waves which travel at relativistic speeds in Earth's atmosphere, but it like even the passive ones, Ghidorah is not able to get away from. And then like the one that's charged up should just inherently, and Ghidorah is FTL for sure. Based on the atomic breath scaling, he's able to like dodge the atomic breath. So if we're taking that interpretation of the atomic breath, then the EMP itself, even the passive ones, are FTL, and then the one that he charges up is just like more power put into it. So the outward force should be greater, which should increase the velocity. So I don't see a way that Orochi would actually outspeed that. I think Orochi probably just gets like roasted. And if we're going thermonuclear as well, like those passive blasts are going to be happening, and Orochi won't have an opportunity to get close to Godzilla because he would just start melting as he gets close.
Yeah.
Like Godzilla, just the heat he's putting off is like melting steel and like burning Ghidorah's like scales, and Ghidorah easily is multi-continental at a bare minimum, probably high planetary in terms of durability. So there's really not much of a discussion about like what Orochi could do in that scenario. He's just gonna get fried.
Yep. So base Godzilla, probably a stalemate, but thermonuclear does win this one.
Yeah.
So Godzilla does reign as the king of the monsters.
Yes, sir.
Until a time machine pops up, and out of it pops out pre-redraw Orochi, which we are actually gonna touch upon. Because pre-redraw actually does have somewhat different scaling and feats from post-redraw. So this guy, I'm sure you all remember him, or unless you're really new, but like this guy, what he does is, first of all, possibly over 95 times faster than light, because he can react to, dodge, and intercept casual Saitama multiple times, who was trying to kill him, by the way. Like, he was treating him as a monster, he was going for the kill, and a more casual Saitama, or a similar Saitama, easily saw and dodged a sneak Flashy Slash from Flashy Flash, and Flashy Flash does scale to those 90 times faster than light levels via scaling to Monster Garo, so this one is a little bit different, and in terms of attack potency, he does scale to normal like baseline normal Saitama. Obviously, the normal punches have varying levels to them. They're not all the same. So, for example, Saitama later in the fight, he speeds up and he one-shots him with a normal punch anyway, but the baseline normal punches that he uses on monsters are capable of being intercepted and stopped by this Orochi. Those same punches actually broke Boros' armor, and Boros is the guy who saw 23%, I believe, of his ship being destroyed, and he thought it was no big deal. And he thought he could still take the intruder, which was Saitama, in his armored state. Like, he wasn't at all interested in the battle. So, what do we get from that is, Orochi should be above the spaceship. The spaceship, it has multi-continental artillery based off calcs, and it can tank Saitama jumping from the moon to the spaceship and crashing into it. And the moon jump has actually been calculated to be anywhere from multi-continental to just plain planetary. So this Orochi might actually scale higher than the previous one in AP as well. Like, he scales to the Gaia cannon with just like his punches and regular blasts, possibly even higher. So how do you think this one goes? The same Orochi, but he's 100 times faster than light and like stronger.
Yeah. So it's gonna be a lot of the same issues, just exacerbated. Like, he's not going to be able to tag him. And so I think thermonuclear is probably the only option. I will say, if he does tag him, and this is where I'll bring up the highest of high-end scaling for Godzilla's...
Please hold off.
No,
Is it
not
necessary?
yet. Okay.
Not yet. We'll get to it.
If we go... So he cannot defeat him in his standard form. Okay? Like, that's just not happening. He's never going to be able to tag him. Orochi has the damage capacity, or the destructive capacity, the attack potency to actually be able to hurt Godzilla. So it's just going to be something where, like, you have Orochi who hits hard enough to be able to take down Godzilla, and is way faster than anything Godzilla can react to. So base Godzilla's out the window. So then it comes to thermonuclear. If you take a lower end interpretation, Orochi should just be able to like tank the passive ones, and then the supercharged EMP might do significant damage to him. But if he's able to even like tank it a little bit, then after that Godzilla's kind of just cooked. So you have to take a higher end interpretation of the thermonuclear blast in order to actually give Godzilla the W here. And if you do, then like Orochi's only hope is outspeeding it, which he should be able to. Like, he should be able to. But Orochi in character does kind of just like take damage because he knows that he can recover from it. So you can make an argument that higher end thermonuclear Godzilla is able to win this with his like most powerful EMP blast. But you could also argue that if Orochi is smart, he would just run away from it and then come back, and then Godzilla's cooked.
I mean, the pre-redraw Orochi, because the post-redraw, yeah, he's kind of cocky, but he also does take precautions with, like, immediately going for his strongest move against someone who he thinks is impressive, but the pre-redraw one actually just sees Saitama exuding a dangerous aura, and he makes sure to dodge every single punch he tries to throw. And like every single time Saitama tries to attack, he always intercepts him with like a dragon from the side or just dodges him. So if he sees this massive EMP being fired, he might just turn tail and run away. And then just come back later. So like, this one is kind of cheap because like Orochi just kind of runs away and just tries to win that way. But like in a regular fight, he still couldn't really bring Godzilla down thermonuclear. But he might be able to just run away. Yeah.
So, and then if he does run away and then he comes back afterwards, I mean, all of that energy is kind of discharged. So then Godzilla just like doesn't have anything in his arsenal that's going to be able to tag him. Like, his only hope is dispersing this, you know, omnidirectional blast that basically like negates the weakness of the atomic breath, which is it's a focused beam. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's really not a win condition here for Godzilla unless you just assume that Orochi's just not gonna run away from the blast. Which is weird.
He might do, like in character, like he's cautious, like this version of Orochi specifically. So.
Yeah. No, I think he would. I think he'd see it, and if he's like 100 times FTL, it's gonna be like it's moving in slow motion.
Yeah, like it's even if we take like a higher end, like star level Godzilla and whatnot, like he still just runs. He books it.
100%.
Next up, we have Orochi again, but this time he's coming in with a massive upgrade. He fused with an expert Esper named Psychos, who already scales to base Orochi probably, that it's like suppressed base Orochi level combatant, fusing with Orochi, and then getting powers from literally God. So it's kind of an insane buff.
Yeah.
So this is the size if you lowball Psyrochi, in terms of height. Pretty big.
Yeah.
And then this is the size if you highball Psyrochi in terms of size.
Goodness gracious.
Also pretty big.
Yeah.
So then we get into the scaling. So this is where things get crazy because, okay, Orochi has that small planetary level feat. We'll say that's a 1 on the scale. And I'm gonna do the scale because I've mentioned this over and over in videos, but people still don't seem to really realize how big of an increase Psyrochi actually is from Orochi. So we're just gonna do the numbers. Orochi's Gaia Cannon has to be much stronger than his actual, like, just his sucking force alone, you know, the vacuuming force of his tail. So we'll say it's twice as strong. I think that's a reasonable, like, interpretation. Saitama one-shots him. A one-shot increase is typically 7.5 times, so that's now 15 times higher than that feat. Then incomplete Psyrochi, in one of the craziest lines I have ever seen in any manga or anime, literally calls Saitama fodder.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard an anime character refer to someone else as fodder? Like, in the community we're used to it, but like, in the actual anime and manga? Incomplete Psyrochi, before she spreads her roots and grows in size, she says, yeah, Saitama, the one that one-shot me earlier, that's fodder now. So, assuming that fodder means just completely insignificant, it should be another one-shot increase. So now we get 112.5 times higher than Orochi. And then Psyrochi becomes complete. She gets way bigger. She goes from being a joke to Tatsumaki to actually making her sweat and question where she could have gotten this much power from, because like Tatsumaki backs this up. She's like, where is this much power coming from? Just merely fusing monsters together should not result in this monstrosity. And we get Psyrochi spreading out roots all across the city, and over time all across the planet. That was the intention. She would have like literally just assimilated the entire planet into herself over time. So we get her absorbing all this energy from these roots, which are specifically said to be empowering her. So every second she's getting stronger and stronger. So assuming that by absorbing these and by doing this massive increase, that she goes from being a joke to Tatsumaki to being actually threatening, we'll just say that's a 2 times increase to lowball. That is still 225 times higher than Orochi's Suck Force feat, or High Planetary. Specifically 7.5 times 10 to the 33 joules in terms of power. And Sage, where did you say Godzilla's scaled? In terms of like lowballed atomic breath in terms of the planetary one?
Yeah, so lowball atomic breath is, I believe, 2.56 to the 33rd joules, which is, right in that planetary, that like 5B range.
So like exactly the same ranges pretty much, but Psyrochi's a little bit higher.
Yeah.
So now we actually have someone who can overpower that lower version of Godzilla.
Right. Yeah, and then also you add in the massive speed advantage there, and it's a serious issue. And we also know...
Yeah, like just for speed, like this is the same Orochi, but better in like literally every single regard. Speed would be included.
Yeah.
And she can also fight Tatsumaki, who can later react to Sonic, who can later fight Flashy Flash. So again, like Flashy Flash 95 times faster than light, even in the Monster Association, because he later gets way faster. And that's when Tatsumaki reacts to him. And Psyrochi can react to Tatsumaki, so...
Yeah.
It's just... Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's bad. It's really bad. There's not a lot that can be done here. I mean, like, I don't see a way in which, even if you take the highest of ends for Godzilla's speed, he's nowhere near that level of speed. So he's going to have to get really lucky. Even the omnidirectional blast is not going to really matter, because typically characters, durability-wise, will scale somewhere around their attack potency. And so if that's the case here, then the omnidirectional blast may not even be enough to put down Orochi.
Yeah, because Tatsumaki, one thing she can do is casually stop an energy beam from Psyrochi, like one of those ones that were slicing up continents, and scales massively, massively above Orochi. That beam, what's important about it is that Tatsumaki blocks it effortlessly, but Tatsumaki cannot effortlessly break through the barrier that Psychos has around her, because she has psychic powers too now, so she's got a barrier, and it's specifically stated to be a problem for Tatsumaki. Like, I have no doubt that she could break through it if she powered up fully, but at that point, various heroes were still on the scene, and it was still probably not in her best interest to just go ballistic and all out, because she would have killed everybody. So, like, full power Tatsumaki should be able to break through it, but that slightly suppressed Tatsumaki, who could casually toss away those planet-level beams, could not casually just break this barrier. So, it's just kind of gonna be really bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the size comparison too, like, Psyrochi just kind of skewers the lower versions of Godzilla.
Yeah.
Now, if you go into the higher ones, one thing that I haven't mentioned yet is that Psyrochi is actually stationary. Like, she's basically a turret. So if we go with the higher end interpretations, like star level and everything like that, then it gets a lot less good for Psyrochi.
Yeah, well, and yeah, so star level should be enough to take down Psyrochi because of the stationary aspect. But the problem is, like, it depends on which attack is launched first. It depends on how, because again, like, if we're getting Psyrochi to those levels, then Psyrochi has the ability to actually, severely damage Godzilla, probably before Godzilla can react. So it's one of those things where it's like, more often than not, Godzilla will lose this. But if you give him the benefit of the doubt and say, like, Psyrochi doesn't just, like, blitz off rip, then he has an opportunity to, blast a hole right through Psyrochi.
Yeah, I think, like, the thing is, if we take the higher-end interpretations, he should scale to the attack potency of the atomic breath, because, like, Ghidorah takes it, and, like, he can take a blast from, what's it, Mechagodzilla, which is relative to his blast. So if we take those star-level blasts, like, yeah, Godzilla's weakened, but if his star level, that's still massively, massively above Psyrochi, even if he's weakened. Yeah. So I think, like, the higher interpretations still just kind of skewer Psyrochi. But even if Psyrochi can't really damage him, she might be able to toss him into space with psychic powers. The thing in One Punch Man, though, is that if you are just inconceivably stronger than someone, you can't move them even with Esper powers. Like, the Esper cannot move somebody who's inconceivably stronger than them and doesn't want to be moved. Yeah. Like, for example, in Tatsumaki versus Saitama, she could toss Saitama around until he refused to be tossed around any longer. Like, he just actively started resisting it, and that's it. She could not move him at all after that. So the same is gonna happen here. Like, Godzilla is not gonna be willfully tossed into space. He's gonna resist it, and yeah, I don't think Psyrochi can do anything after that.
Yeah, I agree. And now, so this really, again, comes down to your interpretation of, number one, who strikes first, and number two, where are you scaling Godzilla and Psyrochi to? Because, like, higher-end interpretations, Godzilla, if he is able to land that blow, should definitely win, but lower-end interpretations, he's just getting blitzed, and maybe not one shot, but, like, with the speed disadvantage, it's like Psyrochi could probably launch like 5 attacks before Godzilla could launch even one. So, yeah, I think more often than not with consistent scaling, Godzilla should probably lose here. But if you take the higher end interpretations, he has an opportunity if he's able to land a blow.
Yep. So now, Godzilla, with the higher end interpretations, he's run the gauntlet. He's conquered the planet. He is the king of monsters. And he is protecting Earth, he is protecting humanity, and a certain someone does not like that, and that certain someone is literally God. So the final boss is God comes down from the heavens with the seal broken, and he just comes in. This is how big he is. That's the moon, by the way.
Oh, nice.
So now, break out every stop. Make Godzilla the strongest he can possibly be, because I'm telling you, God is worth it. Like, now it's a worthy opponent for peak, hyper-literal, like, every interpretation of Godzilla possible. Like, the highest possible interpretation.
So, comic Godzilla solos, but we're going with... Yeah, we're going with just Legendary Monsterverse. Even with just that, if you want to take the most hyper-literal statements you possibly can, let's just go through this. His atomic breath is described as working on a quantum level, okay? It's then shown penetrating a portal and holding it open. That gets it to 4D. And then, if you want to take into consideration that it is stated to be a product of nucleosynthesis, if you want to say that nucleosynthesis happens while it's being fired as well, that would mean that it's breaking down the matter that it comes in contact with into more elementary particles as well, which would mean that it's literally subatomization. So then you have a character with the most hyper-literal statements there, and add on the most devastating weapon in the universe or in nature statement, and you get this blast to a... I mean, what would be the most devastating thing that could happen? I would say... You could say literally the Big Bang. So, if you take everything to its furthest logical conclusion, you have an atomic breath that scales to or above the Big Bang, that deatomizes everything that it comes in contact with. Oh, and by the way, it can affect things in a 4D scale. So, yeah.
Pretty insane. Pretty insane.
Now, here's the thing. I don't think God would allow that, if we're scaling it that high, to actually hit him. But if it did, you want to talk about how God would deal with subatomizing 4D Big Bang level attacks?
I can actually just hold. Let me get one thing real quick as well, because I actually did not prepare the scan for that one.
Yeah, while he's looking for that, this
Let
is
me get it really.
this
quickly.
is one of the. I mean, obviously, this is not a consistent line of scaling for him. But again, if you take these statements hyper literally, that's where we can get him to. And you know, if you want to make an argument for it, you just say that he's always weakened. There's never a point until we reach Godzilla X Kong that he's actually getting back to what would be perceived as like something like his peak power, because there are multiple statements throughout Godzilla, King of Monsters, and Godzilla versus Kong that talk about him being like even below 50%, being malnourished and starved for not absorbing energy, all of these different things. And so you could just say like he's massively weakened. And then you could even say that if he's below 50% power, because of the way that he generates his atomic breath, where he takes more elementary particles and converts them into something greater with nucleosynthesis, that it's more of an exponential increase. So instead of saying, oh, he then, like if he goes from 50% power to 100% power, he then like just doubles in his, power output, it would be more like he goes from 50% charge, and that charge he's able to convert into something that's exponentially greater to 100% charge. So then there's exponential on top of exponential. So then you could literally have him putting out hundreds or thousands of times greater force output just by getting back to full power. So again, this is a hyperliteral, like maximum end interpretation of Godzilla. But if you wanted to argue for it, that's what you would say.
Yep. So fourth dimensional Godzilla with subatomic, like all that, right?
Subatomization, working on a quantum scale, manipulating quantum particles, yeah.
Yeah. So now we get to God.
Yeah.
And God, first of all, there's this big old hole in space made by beings infinitely weaker than God at this point. This is made from a being clashing with another being who took a small fraction of God's power. That's already like multi-galaxy, nothing too crazy. Subspace portals are a thing in One Punch Man that Garo can use. And those subspace portals, or hyperspace depending on the translation, might be fourth dimensional. If you want to argue it, you can make the argument. It's not the main argument, but Saitama can grab them and kick them and just literally interact with those portals, possibly making him 4th D. But that's not it, because we have Empty Void coming in, and this guy can freely travel outside the universe, across dimensions, into infinite, like, bubbling foam universes and whatnot, and just seeing every branch of reality out there. Like parallel worlds branch out with each possibility infinitely bubbling forth like foam. And this being can then attack from outside the dimension with an attack that is stated to ignore distance, energy, and size, and literally just all the scale you could ever want, all the speed, all the AP. This guy has. Empty Void intervenes from another dimension. And this is pretty insane. Then we also have Blast stating that God resides in a higher dimension, which I don't think it's meant to be like a hierarchy of dimensions where like, oh, this one is just considered higher than the next one. It's probably gonna be a higher dimensional space. So, God, if you think Blast and Empty Void are 4th dimensional, he might be 5th dimensional, but if we don't go that far, we can still say he's in the higher dimension, making him 4th dimensional. And this is just the vessels of God. These guys take slivers of God's power. So, God is actually pretty crazy himself. And in terms of speed, he should scale far greater than Cosmic Garo at his peak. And Cosmic Garo at his feet literally has calculations for being billions of times faster than light via various methods. Just that blast alone that wiped out all those stars in the background is already calculated to be insanely fast. Like, again, trillions upon trillions of times faster than light. And then we have God making that look completely insignificant, because then that, again, that's a sliver of God's power. So how does Godzilla deal with this?
Godzilla gets destroyed. there's nothing. You would need comic Godzilla to come in and face
the
God.
one
Maybe
that's
that would be an
boxing up
interesting
Superman
video.
and whatnot.
Yeah, maybe that would be an interesting video. The comic Godzilla versus God from One Punch Man. But, like, there's just nothing that this version of Godzilla can do. I mean, we're taking the most generous interpretation, and he might not even be able to damage him.
Because, like, again, like, there's this being, Empty Void, that can just travel into a space between universes that's, like, parallel worlds branching out with each possibility. And, like, I guarantee you that God will be revealed to be, like, a multiversal threat at some point. Because, they're setting up the multiverse for a reason, right? Like, there's gotta be some reason to this. Infinitely bubbling forth like foam, like, he perceives these things as foam to him. So it's just, like, again, it's a higher-end interpretation for now, because we don't have super concrete proof of it, but I guarantee that later on it will be pretty concrete.
Yeah.
And again, like, even without that, a slash from a higher dimension, ignoring distance, energy, and size, I mean, that's kind of the definition for fourth dimensional anyway, so...
Yeah, so I just don't see a way that Godzilla does anything here. I mean, the fact that fractions of his power get people to 4D, and, like, this is absolute maximum output Godzilla, it's not a good look.
Yeah. But he did conquer the planet, so God is technically sealed. Because God is he's technically sealed up, so can't really do much.
Well, you know, maybe you give Godzilla enough time, he absorbs enough radiation, he can get to that level.
Maybe. Who knows? No, God just reaches out to Godzilla and tries to corrupt him to make him into a vessel and take him over.
Dude, he probably would. I mean, if you see somebody with that level of power and then you can add an additional 4D amp on top of it, why not?
Yep. So yeah, that was the video. I had a lot of fun personally with this one. Just, like, a lot of interesting discussion to be had.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, thank you for coming on. Again, definitely check out Sage of the Cavs. He does a lot of awesome content, including some Godzilla content. We may or may not have a pretty spicy One Punch Man video coming up as well whenever the manga comes back and we get more feats from Empty Void. Because it's currently on hold because of that, because the hiatus, and we just don't want to prematurely do it, but there's gonna be something spicy coming up.
Come on. Yeah, I'm excited. It's always it's always good to be on the channel, dude. If you guys liked the video, make sure to, I mean, you made it an hour and a half in almost, so make sure to like the video. Also, if you're not subscribed to Satri, what are you doing? I mean, living under a rock is not, it's 2024. You know, let's subscribe to Satri. And, you know, let us know if there are any other matchups you guys want to see. If you guys do want to see comic Godzilla versus One Punch Man God, that might be interesting, or even versus like Saitama, we can take lower end interpretations and go from there. So I'm always interested in coming back. Satri's going to be over on my channel very soon, so, you know, definitely come check me out. But yeah, it's been a pleasure, man. It's always a good time.
Yeah, pleasure to have you here. And with that being said, I hope you have a good rest of the day. See you next time. Goodbye.